Hello and welcome to the Doublethink Dialogues podcast. So we're back again with illegal immigration. So many topics that this opens up in regards to society and I guess let's say misleading claims by the powers, etc. So one of the topics we wanted to discuss, which probably will take the entire episode by itself, and probably a lot more to be honest, and that's specifically to do with the claims of, well, are we bringing these people in because we need the labor? And this is especially relevant to Western countries where costs of labor are are they skyrocketing? I don't know. They're not as skyrocketing anywhere near as fast as inflation. So, but they are a significant portion of the cost of whatever services and goods are supplied by companies. So you had some thoughts you wanted to share specifically on whether we actually have a need for the extra labor in this country.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I can think of a few things that push me in the direction to where I am. And I probably had a strong inclination to go there in the first place, which, as you can guess, the answer is no, we don't. But I'm thinking of a promotion campaign by Domino's Pizzas. Now, I think that the head of that company was one of those who argued that we desperately need more people to make the economy work. There was a time last year or the year before where the streets around here, the street corners, they were lined by young men and women dressed as pizzas. And I'm thinking, we need, we're desperate for labor, and you're going to use them for something absolutely degrading, which probably barely pays them enough to eat it, to get enough food to survive. And we need that labor. I don't think so.
Yeah, I guess that's the question, isn't it? And that's where the whole division between what do we need and what do certain people want.
Yes.
Because literally in the United States, the Democrats were making this exact claim. Well, who's going to cut your grass then?
Yes.
And you're like, are you serious? You want to bring these people in to do menial labor because otherwise you don't want to pay someone else a living wage to do that labor, right?
Yes.
So you're happy to have such people live, 20 to a house,
yes,
to a small house, maybe even 20 to a room in some cases, just because you want to have a reasonable, low cost, menial labor kind of thing. And kind of what you were saying, right?
Yes.
Do we need them to do the jobs, or do certain people want to bring them in to do those jobs that they aren't willing to pay other people to do?
Yes. And do they want, as I was saying in a recent podcast, are they companies that are invested in property, and they see mass immigration as a way of preventing a drop in the value of those property? We need enough people to create demand for all the houses we've brought up, or what other, if not sinister, not very benevolent motive do they have for wanting all these extra people to come in? And what sense of responsibility? Am I going to cause offense by comparing it with keeping a dog? Well, in the saying approach right now, a dog isn't just for Christmas. It's for several years. Well, a human being isn't just for a couple of years' employment. It is for that generation and the next generation and the next generation. And, we could stay here all day and I still wouldn't have finished how long the commitment you've taken on to look after these people. But the person who initiated it just wanted, a cheap pair of hands the next few months. And they could, if we were Saudi Arabia, you could put them on the next plane home. I don't think we can do that. And you could stop them bringing their wife who would have half a dozen children by them. Can we stop them doing that? I don't know if we can.
Well, this is some of the surprising things, not surprising to me or others of similar thought, but surprising apparently to a lot of the elites, the powerful people, the politicians in, for example, the EU as well. And I think also in the UK, a lot of them, that with the waves of immigration, illegal migrants that were coming in, let's say since 2012, more or less, the surprise that they didn't then go back home, right? Even with refugees as well.
Yes, with Anja.
And they're surprised.
Was up to date enough to know, but she seems honestly to have believed they were going to go back about now. And they had the Turks. Did the Turks go back?
Yeah, and it's strange. Like they're coming here for Like the refugees, you have a different story. But even still, if their homeland has not been fixed up after the war, there's not really a lot of places to go back, and that's a particular case. But the migrants who we actually know are 75 to 90% of the people coming into the country. What purpose, what reason would they have to go back? Right? They're literally coming here for a better life.
Yes.
That's why they're coming. They're not going to go back.
And they will always, I mean, yeah, it is a better life, but they'll always have an unimpeachable reason why they have to be here. People will have put down roots here that they can't, family ties after 6 months or a year. Now the Ethiopian Jews, is that the Falashas? I don't remember, but they had been supposedly migrated from Israel to Ethiopia for a couple of thousand years. When a plane was available, take them back, inverted commas, to Israel, they were quite happy to get on board. But, people who come to a richer country, surprise, surprise, they don't want to go back.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that brings up another issue, doesn't it? How long do you go back before you're a native of the area?
Yes.
And we've never, for some reason, we don't want to address this issue. We don't want to resolve it, which is part of the problem with the Israeli-Gaza conflict. At least in some circles, the argument is, who was there first? Well, after a couple generations, does it matter? It doesn't really matter, right? And it's the same in every case. And that's going to be the same in our case as well. Like we, and Europe as well, US, Canada, we are literally changing the demographics of our country. And that's not inherently a bad thing. The bad part, in my opinion, comes when you change what their country represents. Now you can argue that, some people will argue England represents colonialism, et cetera, which to some degree they're not wrong. But I think the conversation has not been had of what exactly it is we should be holding on to of what our country represents. And England representing democracy, in theory, free speech. They didn't quite get that right, but it's close. It's closer than a lot of other countries. And things like that, which are being destroyed by bringing in people who are not vetted, who have significty different beliefs on these,
and equality of women, which it's not an ancient British tradition, but it is now part of our culture,
right? And
it is not part of some other people's culture.
But moving back to the labor part, so we, I think, probably agree that we don't necessarily need more labor. There are lots of jobs available. They don't necessarily pay a lot. We do have an issue with, I think, call it, from my old person perspective, entitled young people syndrome, perhaps, right? Where, because, and this could be blamed on social media to a big degree, because the young people will see all these lavish lifestyles, and who wants to start at the bottom and work yourself up, work the way up when you see all these people getting rich quickly on these lavish lifestyles. And so, we'll end up with a dearth of people taking these lower level starter jobs. But the problem we're also creating by doing this, and I've seen it now single-handed, I've seen it now in person in Heathrow Airport was somewhere that was quite obvious. I've now see it in our own town here in Northern England. And that is that we're creating a new stratification of our society by income linked to visible minority skin color, basically.
Particularly, I mean, you're seeing that care working is now a
care working, definitely,
almost not exclusive, but from not being any different from any other occupation, is a predominantly black activity. Very suddenly,
in that case, it's quite off. Yeah, it is largely some Africans, and in the care facilities is often Filipino.
Yes,
tend to be quite good at it, to be honest. But yeah, in the other places, then in Heathrow, what I saw in the maintenance staff, for example, even within the space of about 1 or 2 years, how much the demographics of the maintenance staff has changed. And again, it's not inherently that they're any worse at the job, or I should be upset at this. It's that we're creating a visibly stratified society, which isn't going to go well in the future, I think, because you're just creating race relation issues, basically. In our own town with the Christmas festivities, this was very strange to me, but the charities have people singing to collect, on the streets and that with buckets there. And they were all Black people, which is strange for Northern England, but it's also strange that there was no demographic variety. It's like, where did these people come from? And were they all selected because of their skin color for this job, or were they the only ones that would be willing to take this task? Like, I didn't understand it. It's the first time we've ever seen that. And it stands out because it's so unusual. And this was, not just one or two groups. It was every group I saw was the same.
And so you tend to have a very, a younger generation of ethnic minority people. I should stop using ethnic minority. I don't know at what point I become.
Pretty soon.
Yeah. But the idea that, that is the answer to our low birth rate and our aging population. All these people we've brought in to exploit are going to willingly pay taxes to look after an aging, selfish white population that's been screwing them for the last 40. I think there must come a point where you say, right, we're cancelling the old age pension for the next 30 years until it's predominantly our own people needing it. There's a whole generation, and why not of white British people who will, frankly, you can go without for all I care if I've been brought in the way people are being brought in now.
Yeah, that's a very valid point, because we do know that almost all countries in the world now have inverted age demographics or are in the process of their countries developing inverted age demographics, which gets onto another topic of my interest in this, which is, I believe, one of the reasons that so many people are being brought in willingly is to try and shore up that population, the age demographic difference, to convert it from an upside down pyramid to like at least a chimney. But you are completely right. I think once you create this visible stratification of society, and you're just by the nature of that stratification, you're going to have old, rich, white people who are the majority population will be at the top of the financial strata. And then you're going to have young, poor, visible minorities at the bottom of that. And that can't do anything but cause conflict once that minority gets to a certain population percentage of the population. It invariably does. And it's usually around 10%. Once it reaches that percentage of the population, it starts causing conflicts. And then, that's not really going to be a good recipe, because let's face it, young people are much more energetic and vocal and aggressive than old people. So, so that won't bode well for anyone potentially. But so I was interested also, like I said, in the idea that we're trying to shore up our demographics, because in the West, we do have, lower than replacement birth rates, and we have for quite a long time. I mean, it went into decline in the 70s, and no one's really bothered studying that, but that's another topic as well, because there's a lot of reasons potentially for that.
But the business of shoring up and trying to restore the parallel age structure is it trying to make us fit the economy, where I tend to think, well, the economy should be fitting the people. It is not, this is what the economy needs. We hear so many people saying, oh, this economy needs, some of my conversations with liberals about immigration are, their stock reply is, it's good for the economy. I mean, I don't know what expletives I thought, the economy, but it's more or less, basically, I don't care about the economy. I think we're a long way short of on average going point. Now we could talk again about, are some people suffering a cost of living crisis? I mean, I'm sure some people are, but a lot of the rest are just suffering a slightly less affluent crisis.
Yeah, some of that's true for sure. Well, I think so. So when I look at it, from what I've heard, and I'm not an economic expert by any stretch of the imagination. Now you could be right, but the question is, I mean, the economic structure is set up in a certain way at the moment, so that when we're older, we want to retire, we want to relax. So we have our pension plans, which are taken care of by the younger generation if you have a proper pyramid structure to your society. So that would be where the economic part comes in. And if you invert that pyramid, you no longer have, and especially if you invert that pyramid and then give the people, the younger people, lower paying jobs, you don't have any way of supporting the top of the structure. And that's where the economic system will then fall apart. Now you could, if there was the political will and maybe the political intelligence, to attempt to restructure that. And maybe things like automation might help restructure it. I don't
Yes, we're
know.
talking about a labor shortage, and the next page of the newspaper will be, in 10 years' time, we'll all be out of work because because of AI and robots.
Yeah, that makes an interesting case. Then we're getting a bit off the topic of immigration. Well, a little bit. It's all related, isn't it? But okay, if we go to that stage, which is a little bit absurd because at the moment, at least, AI is another tool in the toolbox, and it'll make certain jobs obsolete. It'll make certain jobs more effective and require less people. And it might open up new avenues for other jobs. But where does the money come from still to support the older people, right? So we're going to have old people for pretty much the rest of this century, at least. I mean, most people assume they're going to be a lot longer than that. I'm a little bit more negative, but that's another topic again. But so then we're going to basically have corporations, which in some ways, I guess, is a socialist dream. The corporations pay for everyone. Even the corporations are going to have to get their money from somewhere. Like they're going to have, because the whole thing is a circle, right? You produce goods and services that people buy, that feed the companies that produce.
Yeah, and where you take the money out for taxes is arbitrary, really.
And the government takes its money out basically to do whatever it's doing, and it goes around. And the problem being that if people don't have any money because they're getting it from whatever, like, but the companies can't, there's a whole break in that circle. Like where does this come from? Now maybe you can argue, some people have, that we need another system that's not dependent on money, which could be true, but it's still a matter of exchange somehow. And maybe that's where we're going. Maybe it's just pure exchange, but then you end up really with bread lines and stuff, don't you? Because you're going to be giving rations for stuff. You're going to be given certain quotas. You might have this Simpsons gig economy that they did in one episode where, you do community service and you get certain points that you can then trade in for stuff. I mean, that they might end up going that way. I don't know.
Which might be equivalent, just while people carry on working longer. I mean, how you organize and whether they have conventional paid jobs or whether you do need to do that. I don't know. But I'm not, and as potentially, if not already, an older person, I'm rather more sanguine about the fate of the old, in the sense that I've got some sense of the nation, and I'm not nationalistic, but as an ethnic group, as a genetic group, as a group of, as a biological thing, the people, and to say, well, right, we will effectively abolish that, we will replace it, because that's what, I mean, there's always the chance, if you didn't have the option of bringing in labor from outside, there's the chance that various forces, there'd be balance and birth rates would go up. But in a sense, opting for bringing people in is virtually squeezing that nation out of existence. And I'm saying, well, the nation traditionally has sacrificed a whole generation. I mean, if you think of it, I'm reading about it at the moment, if you think about the Battle of Britain pilots, or actually they were the few. I mean, if you think of the First World War generation, I mean, I don't think going to the Somme was a great idea, but people did. And it was a sacrifice worth making for the country. Now, I would think, and so now we're going to let the country as a nation, we're going to kill that for the comfort of one generation of elderly. I don't think so. I would have some very much more draconian answers for what to do with the elderly, including me, before I would go down that route.
Yeah, I suspect the decline of the nation state is yet another great topic for this.
Yeah, and I mean, the state part of it and the nation, as in what color flag do you have part of it?
Right, exactly, yeah.
And even ethnically, just I'm not that bothered about keeping us distinct from anyone. So there's not very much left that I'm clinging to, except in the long run to say, well, when we're all mixed up in 1,000 years' time, I would like my relative gene frequency to be as high as possible.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the main, like what you just said in many ways about, I'm not terribly bothered. I'm from Canada. I argue that Canada is the best blended country in the world. Some people might challenge that, but I think it is. So I'm not terribly bothered by the mix of ethnicities. What I find most important is that we hold on to certain values that are crucial, right? Yeah. I think that's crucial. But moving away from that, in terms of the immigration itself, I do feel that someone somewhere has realized we need more people to shore up this, and because they are thinking old school model. Let's just assume they're thinking old school financial model. We don't have the people at the bottom to support the pyramid, so we need new people, and the birth rates, because our birth rates are declining. So we need to bring in people from other countries. We need to scavenge the people from Africa and Asia mostly, right? Those are where the birth rates are still above replacement levels. So we're we're encouraging people from those areas of the world who have high birth rates to come here. Not officially, but it is more or less, right? I mean, when you literally have your leader saying, welcome illegal immigrants to our country, that's pretty much encouraging. And that's happened in both North American countries. And so the interesting thing about that, though, is that your birth rates naturally decline because of your country developing, right? And I believe it's due to the decrease in infant mortality. It's a natural response to your children surviving longer. You don't need to have as many children. So we already know that because of birth rates globally, that we're going to peak around 10 billion, somewhere around there.
If we can, if we don't run out of food somewhere in the meantime.
Yeah, or we don't kill ourselves in this war. But what that means is, and primarily almost all of those above replacement level are being born in Africa and Asia, which we're trying to poach more or less through our current policies. But eventually those countries will reach a level where they also their birth rates will start declining, unless we keep them in poverty, which should be considered a horrible crime. If our rich nations keep those places low in poor conditions, just so we can have, cheap labor and lots of people being born, right? That would be considered, I think, a crime against humanity. So if those places are allowed to develop, that means their birth rates are going to decrease. That means we're funneling a lot of their people into the West, and they will basically, you can think of it like a pond drying up, almost like literally a gene pool, right? And so we're taking all of the future potential from those areas in a way and taking it. So which could also be considered in the future. Let's go ahead to 2100. If something like this does happen, then those areas of the world can, come back and say, look, you've basically committed, gene theft, if you want to use terms like you like to use, right? You've poached all our people and our potential, our future. And you can get into, as a science fiction writer, I can get into all kinds of interesting conspiratorial ideas on what the powerful might do with empty parts of the world like that, right?
At the same time, you can present someone like myself who is not trying to poach people as a guardian of the rights of sub-Saharan Africa, and saying, look, no, I don't look. And it's already enough jokes. It's not just they're unemployed. It's already their trained nurses, their trained doctors we're poaching. That already is a conspicuous harm that we're prepared to do.
Yeah, and it's specifically because an argument can be made. Oh well, we'll come over. We train them here, and then they'll go back and help out in their countries. But they don't, largely because can argue maybe because they get used to but no one gets used to the British weather. So that's maybe the wealth over here, but it's largely because of the infrastructure in their home countries, the political and social. Let's just say infrastructure in those countries isn't as good as it is here. And so it's going to take a particular person to want to go back there, which are quite rare. So in reality, if we were interested in actually doing that, the way forward would be to work on building in a healthy way the infrastructure of those places. Now, I do think there is some policies that might be in a sneaky way trying to do that, because I don't think the powerful really trust the average person's viewpoint very much, so they don't tell them what they're doing. So one could argue things like climate change policies. One could even argue that our 240 million pound gift to Rwanda could be something similar, right?
Yeah, it's odd that people, the opposition are up in arms against that, and will hang on you. What would you want us to do with them? And you'd like money to go in foreign aid. I mean, forget the Rwanda scheme. This is aid to Rwanda.
Yeah. The only thing is, unfortunately, so many of those governments are so corrupt. Now, I don't know specifically about Rwanda, but in Africa, definitely.
Yes, you can question whether it's a gun. People do question whether it's good for them.
And it's reasonable to question it, because that is one of the biggest complaints, even by Africans coming from their countries and emigrating here, even the ones who do it legally, that the governments are so corrupt that it's just stifling development. And so you need to have some kind of way of removing that corruption and implementing proper systems. When you start presenting that, you start getting shades of, finger pointing. You're a colonialist. You're a colonizer. You want to, and you say, well, it's actually, some kind. It doesn't have to be the Western structure, but it has to be some kind of structure that is ultimately beholden to the people. But unfortunately, Africans itself doesn't seem to be necessarily capable of that. And I'll probably get in trouble for saying that, but you just have to look at South Africa, post-apartheid, right? And apartheid was definitely horrible, but the whole country and the whole area has entirely collapsed post-apartheid, because the political knowledge, I would argue, in a broad sense, is not necessarily there for structuring the society, or the will. Maybe it's just the will is not there for structuring the society to represent everyone and give everyone a chance, right? And that's pretty rare. It's actually a pretty rare thing. And so when we have those societies, we really should model on them and not sort of try to tear them down like it's currently happening.
You could argue it would be good if Africa and other places had, if countries could sell territory, not just sell the land, but sell the sovereignty. So people could buy 50 kilometer square blocks of Africa, in which whoever it would set up an alternative state and attract people and vet people. So basically, you've got scope to try different systems, and that something that's tried is not immediately suppressed by the rest of its country, because there is no rest of its country. It is now independent, and it should be free from that interference.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't really see that working. To be honest, I mean, it'd be like, a much simplified way. If you could even raise money for a country by like there's a company in Scotland that's bought up some territory, and due to a loophole in Scottish law, it's the lords and ladies one, right? So you can buy like a square foot of land where they'll plant a tree, and then you get a title that says you're a Scottish lord, right? Yeah. You could try something, but the corruption of the system still remains without removing the entire. We have systems in the world that are less corrupt. I won't say we don't have corruption. I mean, in the West, the thing in the West is that it's usually kept in check to some degree by a series of systems that counter each other. That's currently collapsing, but that's another issue.
I think you'd need to buy plots of sovereign land free of population and free of, just a blank, and the money to buy it had gone substantially to the people who lived there. So they go, and you invite back, although people come back on the terms of the new ruler.
Yeah, the thing is, I can't see it. Can't see it work. I can't see it working because I can't see any government in such a country doing that. Someone like Canada, I mean, we basically have sold out to the Chinese now, so that's a different issue. But you take a corrupt country like one of the African ones. And what ruler of such a country would willingly give up territory in any way, right? First of all, countries just don't give up territory anyway.
But it has to be, the least valuable territory anyway. I mean, like say Hong Kong, it has to be somewhere that has that has got
That's
nothing.
going to cause you problems.
Yeah, well, no, but I mean, it is not. I'm not saying yes, we want 50 by 50 kilometers, and by the way, we want it the bit that has your gallium reserves in it. I mean, I'm saying, look, this is nothing at all. Anything that of any, it's the Sahel or whatever. It's whatever happened there will be the result of the people who went there and made it.
So yeah, so I mean, I do see what you're saying, but I think you'd have to. It wouldn't be giving up sovereignty because I don't think anyone would go for that. I think you could perhaps finagle some legal arrangements or something, like whatever happens there that's successful benefits the country or something. And then you change the laws for those localized areas so that they don't necessarily reflect those of the country, but they have more of an international kind of legal structure.
Yeah, a bit like what are our plans for duty-free zones? I don't know if that ever went anywhere, but there was a plan to set up for development zones around Britain with some kind of tax exemption. I did.
Yeah, I mean, usually those tax exempted states are benefit the rich, aren't they, anyway?
But I think we have to point out that if we're talking about the way in which, say, Africa could be developed, we're talking about, we're not talking about something very quick, are we? I mean, people answer the immigration and the illegal immigration question by saying, oh, well, obviously we need to improve living standards there. And I say, yes, I mean, that is the pressure, that standards are higher here than they are there. But no realistic person is thinking, and we can raise the level of standards in Africa. So, by the middle of next year, no one will want to come here anymore. All we can do by sharing out, we can lower the living standard here so that no one wants to come here. And ultimately we will do that. But the share, that is, like as in leveling up between North and South, you probably won't lift the North very high. You'll just pull the South down to be.
Yeah. And our case can be made that we are doing that here. But I completely agree. It's not a simple, not only just for realistic, even if we had no historical baggage behind this, it still wouldn't be an easy task. But then you add on to that all the historical baggage, and then it makes it a lot more difficult. So I think, though, we're going to have to end this episode on that note.
But I would like, in that last 2 seconds, I'd like to just throw in the thought experiment. What if there already weren't people wanting to come? If Africa and India were lands flowing with milk and honey. If you said, well, we haven't got enough care workers, well, you just have to, basically you might have to make do with what you've got. I mean, as in wartime, yes, you're always short of labor in wartime because you want your army, you want industry going full tilt. You still want agriculture to feed them. You need more people, but you have to make do with what you've got. And I mean, that would, just as a thought experiment, say, well, how bad would it be in Britain if we just allocated the labor? And I don't mean anything other than market. I mean, other than, say, paying care workers more. Now, there's a controversial suggestion. But maybe using the levers you've got to move the people to where you want them.
Yeah, well, we keep opening up lots of avenues for new discussions. You stole the last word on this one, so I'll give you that. But thank you for listening to this episode. And if you've enjoyed it, please share, like, and subscribe to Doublethink Dialogues, and we'll talk to you next time.